Hello, I'm the Reverend Sarah Keane, curate in the Golden Cap team. What are you afraid of? That's a question we considered at a recent meeting of the Limes study group. We were looking at the passage in Mark's Gospel in chapter 4, where Jesus calms the storm. As you may recall in that story, whilst Jesus and the disciples are crossing in the boat, a great storm comes up. Jesus is asleep, and the disciples are terrified for their lives. Even though many of them are fishermen, this is the worst storm many of them have ever experienced. So they wake Jesus up quickly, and he indeed stills the storm for them. And when they start murmuring, why did he let them get into this state and not do something faster? He replies, "Why are you afraid? Do you still not have faith?" In other words, surely they should have trusted him and known that he would never let any real harm come to them. So we considered what sort of things frightened us. We thought first of all about all sorts of things like furry rodents and spiders, but that got on to some much deeper questions of anxiety about our futures. We also recounted some stories when we'd felt truly terrified. I'll let the others speak for themselves because theirs are their stories to tell. But for me, the most terrifying thing that ever happened was when I was working in Africa, in Malawi, when I needed to travel on the road between Blantyre in the south and Lilongwe, the capital, about 3 hours away, on what was jokingly called the M1, but had the most terrible reputation for accidents. The taxi driver, who was working with me all week, tried to persuade me in the early afternoon to set out straight away, given that he knew how bad the road was. I, of course, in my Western ignorance, seeing the bright sunshine, decided that I'd like to fit in 1 or 2 more meetings before we left. Now, for those of you who've spent any time travelling in Africa will know, there's no twilight in Africa. 1 minute it's still full daylight, and the next minute you're plunged into darkness. And in Africa, that really does mean darkness. Outside of the cities, there are no lights. And I don't just mean no street lights. I mean that none of the cars have lights on them either. Africans who lived their whole lives in the bush have tremendous night sight, so they don't feel the need of other illumination to see what's around them. And that even applies when they're driving motor vehicles. After an hour or 2 in good light, suddenly night fell. There is nothing more terrifying than being in a car going fast on a road where you come right up behind a truck with no lights on it and only realise it's there at the last minute. I could feel my taxi driver not only being annoyed with me, but actually getting quite worried for his own safety. Not a good place to be in. But being a young man with quite a fast car, that didn't stop him trying to overtake things. And again, we were meeting head-on, cars going in the opposite direction with no lights on. We missed them by millimetres. I had gone completely silent at this point. I don't think I have ever prayed so fervently. Of course, fortunately, my prayers were answered. We did make it to Lilongwe in one piece. I got quite a telling off from the driver. But I also had much to thank God for enabling me to arrive safely at my destination, even though in a sense, due to my own stupidity, I probably didn't deserve it. and it was intimations of my own mortality that were very much at the heart of many of the discussions we had at the study group. We're all of a certain age, and so the next years as we look ahead are not necessarily going to be easy ones. We do know, of course, all of us, that one day we will die. But as one member of the group said for all of us, it's not being the dead that worried her, it's the process of getting there. Likewise, many of us were worried that if we were blessed with a long life, would that be the same for all the people we knew and loved? As scary as our own steps towards the end might be, we also feared the loneliness of separation from those we love. But collectively, we all came to the same conclusion. As Jesus was saying, it's not what are you afraid of, but why are you afraid? Like the disciples, we should have faith. Deep down as Christians, we know that God will be there for us and walk alongside us, whatever life throws at us. We're never alone, however lonely parts of old age may seem. We've been studying a rather good book from which this comes, John Pritchard's 20 questions that Jesus asked. And each one of them is quite testing. Jesus liked to put his disciples on the spot. But what he was helping them to grasp was that if you have faith, you know that God will always be there for you. Life won't always be easy, but we know that God is watching over us. And when the time does come to take those final steps, not only will he be with us there every step along the way, but he'll also be there to welcome us into his everlasting kingdom. And for that reason, we shouldn't really be too afraid. Goodbye.